If you would please give the following a hand, and then I will introduce our moderator. From your left to right, we have Governor Gary Johnson. Carl Pearson. Leroy Saunders. Bill Still. And R. Wrights. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with our moderator for the last couple of months as we've talked about this debate, and I wanted to thank her before she starts because I know that she's put a lot of work into this. I would like to introduce to you Sharon Harris. She is the president of the Advocates for Self-Government, which is based here in Georgia. She is also a founding member of the Libertarian Party of Georgia. I will leave it to those who wish to seek the history to find out what year that was. But I don't believe that she was a founding member. With no further ado, our moderator, Ms. Sharon Harris.
Thank you. I was 5 years old then, okay? Just for the record. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm really excited to have all these candidates here. I've heard them speak before, and I think you're in for a real treat, and I think you will really enjoy it. What we're going to do today, what I would like to do, the debate is going to have kind of two parts. The first part is a chance for you to get to know these candidates, and it is mainly designed for you as delegates to the National Convention who will be selecting our candidate for president. That you will get to know them, get to know what they're all about, why they're running, and so forth. So we're going to ask some questions about that. Then we're going to move to issues, and we're going to move really fast. We're going to give them a chance to answer 8 or 9 issues really quickly in a soundbite form as if they were being asked by the media. So you'll get to see how they do under pressure and how they answer questions from the media. So with no more ado, we're going to proceed. And what I would like to ask you, since we only have 90 minutes, and it does take a lot of time to get everybody a chance to speak, I would like for you to just kind of hold your applause in the first part where they give their opening statement so we can just move along. And then later, as we're discussing the issues, if somebody gives you a really good answer and you like it, please feel free to applaud and give them encouragement for those answers. So we'll move along from now. The way we're going to do it is we're going to start with Governor Johnson and for the first question, and then each time we're going to move down one so everyone gets to be first and last and so forth. Try to be as fair as we can, and every candidate will answer every question. So you will get to hear all of their remarks and their response to each one of the questions. We're going to begin with an opening statement. Each candidate will have 1 minute to make an opening statement in whatever way he wants to do. So we will begin with Governor Johnson.
I think that this country is in deep trouble. And that deep trouble is the fact that we're bankrupt, that we're borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar. And unless we fix this, we're going to find ourselves in a monetary collapse. So 3 promises as president. First, I'm promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. Now, that's not a promise to balance the budget, but it's a promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress. I'm also promising to veto any expenditures that exceed revenue. And even though Congress will have to override those vetoes, I suggest to you that spending will be lower in that scenario than any other possible scenario. And then when it comes to the economy, I am advocating a consumption tax, throwing out the entire federal tax system, replacing it with a fair tax, which I think really reboots the American economy for the next 100 years. It makes our goods and services that we export 23% more competitive, and in a zero corporate tax rate environment, if that doesn't stimulate the private sector to create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know what will.
Mr. Carl Pearson.
Hi. 1 minute, I'm going to say it very quickly. You have 120,000 minutes in college. This 1 minute of mine may give you more than you will get with those 120,000. We could create 20 million jobs in the country by having the first 3 employees be freed of all regulation, be treated as independent contractors. The problem is that that would destroy the values of the major retailers in the country who depend upon having no competition or less competition. So if we decide to go the route as the Libertarian Party and try to create these jobs, we will have the obstacles of the Republicans and the Democrats who don't want any change. So understand that in order for us to get jobs again, we're going to have to take those away from the people who are monopolizing our economy.
Mr. Leroy Saunders.
I'm here today because I want to be the voice of the middle-class American people who've lost their voice through special interests, crony capitalism. We no longer have a say in the rights and the things that go on in our own country. Who's representing you, the homeowner, that's lost 50% of the value of their home? The idea is where capitalism used to be our friend, today it's not. Today companies mandate that we work longer, harder hours without getting paid for overtime. America is the most productive workforce in the world. We work longer hours. We take less days off. But yet the poverty rate is increasing. In Russia, between 1999 and 2009, the Russians saw their increase in wages rise 142%, while the world's greatest workforce in that same period of time, their wages were stagnant. So my question is, who's going to fight for you, the American people? That's what I'm here for.
Bill Still.
I'm not going to stand up because I like pounding on the table. This is what the American people want to hear. Stop the looting and start prosecuting. Do not be deceived. The economy is not good. In the last 4 weeks alone, unprecedented money printing has taken place in China, Europe, and England, and the Fed may soon follow with QE3. Their goal is, number one, to further enrich themselves, number two, to re-elect Barack Obama. Even the strongest banks in Europe can still loan out between 50 and 100 times the amount of money they actually have. In the U.S., that's supposed to be held at 10 times. But guess what? After the 2008 bubble broke, we found out in congressional hearings that J.P. Morgan and Citi were leveraged 52 to 1. In other words, for every $1 million of value, they were lending out $52 million, all at interest. And if we lose our jobs, so we stop paying, they repossess and then they sell it again. In other words, they lent out 5 times more money than was legal. Freddie and Fannie were leveraged 80 to 1, Goldman Sachs 333 to 1, yet no candidate is demanding prosecution for these, the biggest thieves in American history, except for me.
Mr. Lee Wrights.
Well, it's great to be in Georgia again. I feel like a home away from home almost when I come to Georgia. I want to tell you about 2 exciting things that make Georgia a first for this campaign. First of all is I hope all of you, or many of you, have seen our first campaign ad that we have generated. And I can announce to you today that Georgia will be the first place where we will air that campaign sometime within the next 2 weeks. They already have the footage at Comcast. It's just a matter of some technicalities, and they need my signature for something. So sometime within the next 2 weeks, the first Libertarian Presidential ads will be aired right here in Georgia. Second of all, we just 2 days ago started our project, this Million Vote March, which I'm very proud of. And so far, all the other candidates here on the stage, I haven't spoken to the governor yet, but we're all on board for this Million Vote March. The great thing about this march, don't have to give up your favorite desserts, don't have to go down to City Hall. You can drink a beer the day before you go. You just march down to the polling place on November the 6th and vote for a Libertarian. Let's have 1 million votes this year for a Libertarian candidate for the first time.
I'm going to tell you the next 2 questions I'm going to ask so that you won't include the second one in your first one. The next 2 questions are going to be, tell us about your journey to libertarianism. Why is libertarianism important? Why and when did you join the Libertarian Party? The follow-up question for that will be, why are you running for president? And why are you the best person on this stage to be our nominee? So the first question I will tell you again, and we're going to begin with Mr. Pearson. Tell us about your journey to libertarianism. How did you become a libertarian? Why do you think libertarianism is important? And when and why did you join the Libertarian Party?
The Reason magazine featured me back in 1978 in the September edition as the entrepreneur of justice. I created a private court system for profit, and I hired about 19 or 20 New York State judges to be the mediators. And the head of the Bar Association, the chief judge, Lawrence Cook, was the keynote speaker at a Bar Association convention, and he said to the people there, you ought to know about attorney Carl Pearson, because what he's threatening to do is to destroy the court system with his private court system. So I have been, from 1978 to the present, a libertarian in many respects. I joined the party, I don't know how many years ago, it wasn't that many years ago, but I've been a libertarian trying to get ballot access, suing to limit government in many ways, and I will continue to do so. And we need to have people like me and the rest of us on the stage here.
Mr. Saunders?
My transition over to the Libertarian Party was easy because it involved common sense. Whereas people look at the libertarian values, I consider them common sense. And my whole platform is about using common sense and logic. For the first time, I felt that there was actually a group of people who really cared about solving America's issue. I watched tons of John Stossel, and what makes me the best presidential candidate is because I'm the only presidential candidate, even on the Republican stage, that has a concrete, detailed solution for stabilizing the housing market. The American economy will not get fixed unless we stabilize the housing market. That is why when we always look to measure the success of the economy is based on how well the housing market is doing. The housing market is the nucleus of our economy. And I have tons of solutions, from healthcare to solving the HHS to creating jobs. That's what makes me the best candidate.
Mr. Still?
I joined the Libertarian Party in the fall, but I was kind of a small L libertarian for a number of years. I'm the only person in the state of Virginia, as far as I know, who's held elected positions in 3 different parties. I was on the executive committee, one of the top 3 people in the Perot organization, the Reform Party, back in the 1990s. I have to take exception. You can't stabilize the housing market outside of complete monetary reform. Stabilizing the housing market, i.e., trying to re-blow the bubble, is the worst possible thing you could do. Why am I the best candidate? Because I'm the only one sitting here, the only one in any party anywhere who can articulate the correct solution, which is monetary reform. That's the only thing that's going to fix this.
Mr. Wrights?
Well, I didn't really have a journey to libertarianism. I was the product of a libertarian father. My dad never heard of the word libertarianism. I'm not sure my dad's even ever voted. But he raised a libertarian. He raised somebody to mind their own business, take care of themselves, help your neighbor when your neighbor needs help, but stay out of their business when you have no business with them. I joined the party in the late 90s, and from there, much like many people, I finally found a political home. I feel at home with the Libertarian Party. I feel at home every time I'm in front of a libertarian crowd, because I'm with individuals of like mind. The fellowship that I get from this party is far and away greater than anything political that we do, and I appreciate every one of you.
Mr. Johnson?
I think I fall in the category of most Americans, and that is that I'm a classical liberal. And if you Wikipedia classical liberal, that's somebody who believes in less government. That's somebody who believes that decisions that you and I should make are decisions that you and I should make, not the government. When I went to college, it went something like, if you weren't a Democrat in college, you didn't have a heart. And after you graduated, if you weren't a Republican, you didn't have a brain. Well, I think we all have hearts and brains, and I think that's what the Libertarian Party brings together. I was elected governor of New Mexico. I served 2 terms. I'm going to argue I got to serve 2 terms as Libertarian governor of New Mexico under the guise of being a Republican. I changed parties. This is a permanent change for me. I hope to be the spokesperson for the Libertarian Party. I hope to be the nominee for the Libertarian Party, not only now, but I hope to be the spokesman also going forward. This is a change for me that will go on to 2016.
Thank you. The next question is, why on earth are you running for president? And Why are you the best candidate on this stage to be the party's nominee? And we're going to begin with Mr. Saunders.
I'm running for president because our country is facing issues that are critical to our survival. What makes me the best? Because I can solve them by using common sense and logic. For example, HHS was a big decision. Well, you want to solve that? Simply remove the burden of employees having to provide health insurance for their employees. The only reason that's been in place is because of World War II. Companies didn't have the money to pay for employees. So what they did is they gave them health insurance for exchange. Today, there's no need to do that. I've actually worked with several businesses and talked to them about releasing the responsibility of the company providing health care. This way it goes back into the free market, which now health care is cheaper. A matter of simple common sense deduction of knowing how to look at things from the big picture is why I should be the president of the United States.
Mr. Still.
I'm running because the American economy and the world economy is going off a cliff. Right now there's unprecedented money printing on the part, as I said before, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, the Bank of China, and soon the Fed will resume more quantitative easing. In other words, they're just pumping hot money into the system. The beauty for them is the inflationary effects of that are not felt for 18 to 24 months down the road. They'll all be forgotten and gone. But what they're trying to do is to keep all the stock market boats floating to try to get Obama in one more time. For whatever reason, I don't know, you can get conspiratorial about it. I'm merely reporting the facts. What we have to do, you cannot possibly fix this by the dichotomy that's being presented right now by the Republicans and Democrats. Stimulus on the one hand or austerity on the other. Neither one will work, and you'll see that. You'll see it play out first in Greece, then Portugal, Spain, the rest of Europe. You have to take the money power back from the banks and return it into the hands of we the people, or we will never have a chance, and I'm convinced this will occur in my lifetime because there is no alternative.
Mr. Wrights.
Why I'm running for president? If you ask most of my close associates, they will attribute it to mental issues. But I don't believe that. Running for president so I can leave you alone. Part of that vast libertarian conspiracy. We want to take over the government so we can leave you alone. I'm not running for president so I can do things. Running for president so I can undo things. The first thing I want to undo is all the war, all the killing, all the death that we cause around the world, everywhere we go. Why am I the best? Because I don't have to think of a libertarian answer. When I'm asked a question, the answer is there. There's only one answer to every question, and that's freedom. Now, of course, we don't just say freedom, but we have to be better about showing our true choices with rational alternatives. Give an example of how freedom is the answer every single time.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, the reason for running for president would be potentially to change the world a little bit, and a little bit for the better. Why am I the best candidate? I'll let you make that decision, but I would like to let you know in my resume that perhaps having started a business as a one-person handyman in 1974 and having grown that business to over 1,000 employees in 1994 gives me kind of a special outlook on this. I really know what it is to grow and build a business. I'm also an athlete, which I think is important for you all to know. I set goals, and I'm a determined guy. I think you want somebody that can hunker down and do what it takes. And lastly, I was elected governor of New Mexico. I did serve 2 terms, and good government was easy. It wasn't hard, and it started by putting issues first and politics last.
Mr. Pearson.
I can create, through relaxation of certain government rules, I can create 20 million jobs. I can put people back in their homes. I can eliminate the student loan mess that's taking place. You need somebody who is going to do these things for the people. Yes, we need financial reform as well. And I don't disagree at all with the need for that. But I have specific programs that don't cost the government a cent. and we can put people back to work again. I think that's the first thing that we need to do, and that's what I plan to do, and that's why I should be nominated.
Thank you. The next question is, what are your goals for your campaign should you be the nominee, and how do you see your campaign growing the Libertarian Party? We will begin with Mr. Steele.
That's easy. I'm the only one that brings a brand new subset of people into the Libertarian Party. My first documentary called The Money Masters had, at one point before Google video shut down, had 20 million views. That's a lot. This is a group that's basically outside of the subset of the Libertarian Party. They aren't going to come to this meeting here. They aren't going to come to state conventions, but they're going to vote for me. I'm the only one who can break the 5% barrier in this room. Also, I want to get one more plug in before I lose track. There's a group out called GeorgiaCarry.org out front. House Bill 981 is in committee. You have to call your Georgia reps on Monday. They've only got 3 days to get this done. It allows church carry, campus carry, government carry, and eliminates the ban on carry during state of emergencies. Go out and see these guys at GeorgiaCarry.org. This is important. You've only got a couple days to get it done.
Mr. Wrights.
Well, the goal of this campaign is to make sure that there's a libertarian alternative for America in this election. A true libertarian alternative. Not watered down, not softened. A proud libertarian message in where we embrace ourselves and what we're about. Teaching people that we're not the ugly boogeyman that the media has painted us to be far too often. To show that we're just like the rest of America, with families, with friends, and desires and dreams. This Million Vote March is the classic example of what we're trying to do, even beyond my campaign. Whether I'm the nominee or not, the Million Vote March will go on through to November, where we will try to continue to get 1 million votes for the candidate, whoever you choose it to be. We're bringing young people a message that they are resonating with. The Stop All War has really caught their attention. That's why I started it in the first place, because I was getting so much feedback about that should be our issue. So we're taking up the mantle and we're going to carry it forward.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, the goal is to actually win. And how does that potentially happen? Well, potentially the Libertarian nominee polls at 15% and gets on the debate stage in the national debates against Romney, believing he'll be the nominee, and Obama. And if the Republican nominee ends up getting 5% of the general election vote, then the Libertarian Party gets $90 million. I think that will make a huge difference. I hope to be the Libertarian nominee. I will continue the Ron Paul revolution if the congressman fails to get the Republican nomination, and I don't think he's going to get the Republican nomination.
Mr. Pearson.
The goal for the campaign is to get the public, the voting public, to understand that they're not going to have a solution with either the Republicans or the Democrats. Those people are truly interchangeable, and they will resist the changes that you need to be able to accomplish what you and I want to have accomplished. We need jobs, we need homes, we need to have a better educational system. They're not going to provide it to you. And we have to let people be aware of the reasons why they won't provide it, so that they will then vote Libertarian as they should.
Mr. Saunders?
I agree with Governor Johnson. The goal of my campaign is to win. And how do you win? By representing the American people. I am the American dream. A guy who can start out with nothing, and through hard work and good ideas can rise and change his life and become something in life. That is what a lot of Americans feel is missing right now, that there's no way for them to move upward. I have solutions. Again, do you want somebody who says, yes, I can solve the housing market, or someone who tells you you cannot? Because if you solve the housing market, then that will make people say, hey, look at what the Libertarians are doing. And that is how you bring people into the Libertarian Party, by solving issues that affect their lives. When you do that, then people will stand up and notice it wasn't Democrats, it wasn't Republicans, it was the Libertarians who were able to take my home out of 50% loss. It were libertarians who created jobs for us.
Thank you. If you're the nominee and Ron Paul were to receive the GOP nomination, what would you do? And if he doesn't receive the GOP nomination, how will you attract the Ron Paul supporters to vote for you?
Well, I think it'd be great if Dr. Paul and I both were nominees. Double team Obama, that'd be a good deal. If Ron Paul wins, I'm going to run, because I'm doing what Ron Paul, the one thing he won't do, and that's running as a libertarian. There needs to be a standard bearer for our party to stand up for our message and to let people know that we're here. I mean, we can't just pass over and let someone from another party, no matter who he is, you know, we can't give him any slack. We have to maintain our party leadership and be a party. If he doesn't win, which I don't believe he will, I think that we're a natural attraction for the Ron Paul people, because we believe the same thing that Dr. Paul believes in. I mean, it's a shame sometimes, but a lot of times the most libertarian rhetoric you hear is from a Republican, Dr. Ron Paul. So I think we're a natural fit with those, and that we should be cognizant of that and show them how you still have a place. You still have somewhere to go. Just because Dr. Paul didn't win, liberty still has a chance in the Libertarian Party.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, Communication 101, when Ron Paul's not the only messenger. All of us here, if given the chance, I think would take the opportunity that we on stage here have been given, and that is to be able to spread this message of liberty and freedom. And human nature, human as an individual, when I hear the same message from two different people, I begin to understand it a little bit better. And if it's more than just two people, if it's everybody talking about the same message, that's when you actually change the country. And that's the opportunity that exists here. I don't think Ron Paul is going to be the Libertarian nominee. I mean, I think that that's the reality. But somebody's got to take up that torch. I think it will be the Libertarian nominee. I hope to be the Libertarian nominee. At the basis of Ron Paul support, our hearts and minds, and where are they going to go? This is where they're going to go. They're going to choose one of us as the alternative to Dr. Paul.
Mr. Pearson.
Ron Paul and the libertarian ideas are really what we have here, and that we can create jobs by getting the government out of small business. So if Ron Paul is nominated, that's helpful to us. He would be advocating more so than he can now, these libertarian ideals, and we would be doing the same thing. We can create jobs by getting the government out of our hair, and that's what we need. We need to get deregulation of small business, and that's the main thing, and that's why I should be the Libertarian nominee to supplement Ron Paul if he's nominated.
Mr. Saunders.
Ron Paul is a great man. However, Ron Paul is not here sitting in front of you asking for your vote. Ron Paul is running for the Republican. I'm running as a Libertarian candidate. Most people do not care about a president that has a base. Americans are sick of presidents that only represent a small few. My goal is to be president of the United States of all 300 million Americans. That is how you go ahead and you produce a candidate. The country is aching for a third-party candidate. Do you want to produce a candidate that's steeped in ideology, or do you want to produce a candidate that has solutions that will affect the lives of those 300 million people? That is how you produce a candidate that will represent America and have the people behind him. A candidate that can galvanize America instead of constantly divide us based on ideologies.
Well, Ron Paul isn't going to win, but you can't underestimate the contribution that he's made. He's made the American people aware. We gave birth to Ron Paul. The American people are now aware that there's something going on in this group, and we're a decade ahead, so they're going to be looking to us. A lot of this depends on what happens with the economy. I fear that through this unlimited money creation, that the economy is going to look good and Obama's going to skate in. But whether Ron Paul runs or not, whether the economy is good or not, we've got to keep the flame of the Libertarian Party alive. You just can't underestimate the level of dissatisfaction the average American has with the economic situation. They know that the current solutions being offered by the Republicans and Democrats are not working. They're just not sure what is going to work, and I think we can fill that hole. That's it.
Thank you. I'm Sharon Harris with Fox News, and I'm going to tell you right now, Iran is about to get a bomb and send it over here to destroy us, and you're just sitting there. I think you're an isolationist anyway, and you just don't want to do anything about it. What is the Libertarian Party going to do if you're elected president? What are you going to do about Iran? Mr. Johnson.
Well, first of all, I think that we should be vigilant to any military threat, that we should have a strong national defense. The operative word being defense, not offense, and not nation building. I am proposing a 43% reduction in military spending, believing that the biggest threat to our national defense is the fact that we're bankrupt. But Iran is an unintended consequence of us having taken out Iraq. That was their concern every single morning, was Saddam Hussein, and what's he going to do to me this morning? We take them out, that's why we're dealing with this now. I do not think there is a military threat from Iraq or Iran currently. It is something we should be vigilant toward. I think Israel is and will remain a strong ally, and I think it's naive to think that they're not going to act in conjunction with us to solve this issue if, in fact, it rises to the level of real military threat.
Mr. Pearson.
We need to reduce the military expense. We have too many people that are just looking for war in order to be able to create more Predator planes and drones and other armaments and things that are used up in war. So oil is another excuse for war. We ought to just pay the market price for oil instead of trying to go and grab control, which doesn't work, and it drives up or it changes a marketplace. We need to maintain our defense, but we should take people out of foreign countries and just have our military internal and ready to pounce if necessary to defend ourselves.
Mr. Saunders.
We must be wary of the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower tried to warn us in 1961 about letting the military-industrial complex go unchecked. The problem with Iran is we are on the precipice of developing a nuclear arms race. America has become the boogeyman. People feel that they need to get nuclear weapons to protect themselves from us because we don't know how to mind our own business. Let these other people run their country as they see fit. It is not within our Constitution to deploy our troops overseas to fight for another nation's sovereignty or get involved in their civil wars. I'm strong with towing the party line, end all the wars.
Mr. Still.
Well, first of all, this is an impossible hypothetical situation. I kind of agree with one of the other panelists. We should let Israel basically do our work and back off. Local sovereigns in the region are just going to have to step up. Freedom is not free, but the problem is that other nations will never learn to fight for their own freedom if we're always pulling off this interventionist trick. We just have to stop the interventionism and let nature take its course. The others have to learn to learn to fight for freedom themselves.
Mr. Wrights.
Well, I'm tempted to combine Mr. Saunders and Mr. Steele's answer and say that's what it is.
That'll work.
I knew you'd like that. Iran is just the latest boogeyman. And our media and our politicians have gotten good at this, of turning everything and everybody into an enemy somehow, and then we have to go over there and clean up a mess that we have created. I mean, some of my colleagues here have touched on it. We've had a foreign policy of a nosy neighbor policy, as I like to call it. What we've done is we've tried to bribe the Middle East countries into being at peace. And what do we use to bribe them with? Munitions and subsidies. And therefore, we've become an incentive for the warfare to continue because they want the guns and money.
Thank you. I'm with MSNBC now, and I was so happy when we passed the health care bill because now we're going to take care of everybody, and there will be no problems anymore. No one will ever have any medical problems again. But I hear that you don't like this. What is your answer to health care? Mr. Pearson.
Health care, when we had competition, was taken care of by doctors and hospitals, and it was a local problem, and it was well handled, and there really wasn't this need. But as the economy became more and more concentrated, and fewer people owned it, then we had all sorts of programs that benefited a few people. They became richer and richer, and the net effect is that the doctors have lost their profession. They're owned by insurance carriers. It's a shame that people that have gone through medical training no longer own their own practices. We ought to go back to that and have competition locally, and you'll see we won't have as much need for this. Social institutions can pick up quite a bit.
Mr. Saunders.
First thing I would do is repeal Obamacare because it's unconstitutional. The mandate is totally unconstitutional. But if you went to my website, and it's Saunders2012.org, you will notice there's a video with Nixon, and it explains how he implemented the HMOs. It's done under the guise of providing health care for Americans and taking care of Americans, but actually it's about making money and profit by providing less health care. We need to return health care back to the private sector. Stop mandating that companies have to go out and provide health care for their employers. Because what happens is, once we remove that mandate, now you can get health care the same way you can get your car insurance, through free competition and free markets.
Thank you, Mr. Still.
Well, there are a couple big problems that I've never seen addressed before with this health care debate. Number one is the end-of-life problem. We're spending a huge proportion of our wealth just hooked up to wires and tubes trying to make it have our lives be extended an extra week. Now, I'm not talking about a Kevorkian a solution to that, but you can change incentives, and the incentives can make a huge difference financially because so much money is spent. Number two, I'm really down on the whole patentability that thrives within the medical system, how they patent drugs, how they patent medical procedures. This pushes out cheaper alternatives. I was married to a doctor at one time, so I'm kind of aware of this. You can't take it out of the hide of family practice physicians. Right now, these guys are compensated $35 to see a Medicare patient. They're not going to do it. They're telling all the incoming students to not get into family medicine. This is going to run off the cliff, and it's something that we're not going to be able to control at all.
Mr. Wright.
Well, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is that old P.J. O'Rourke quote. If you think medical care is expensive now, just wait until it's free. And he's right. I mean, this is one area where we got to get government out of the way. We need to deregulate the industry. We need to make it easier for drugs to come to market, which the FDA has caused drug prices to be astronomical, and they've proven that they don't really care what's life-saving and what is not life-saving. Folks, the government can't protect you when you're a healthy, able-bodied person at the mall. Why in the world would anybody want that entity to be in charge of taking care of you when you're sick and can't take care of yourselves? Just doesn't make sense. This is one area we need to return back to the people. Put the healthcare decisions in the hands of doctor and patient and no one else. No bureaucrats, no politicians. We need to get government out of the way. That's the answer.
Mr. Johnson.
We should repeal President Obama's health care plan because, very simply, it's not affordable. I'm promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. That is a 43% reduction in Medicaid and Medicare. As governor of New Mexico, I oversaw the reform of Medicaid in New Mexico. We took it from a fee-for-service model to a managed care model. We saved hundreds of millions of dollars and delivered better health care. I believe at that time, if the federal government would have block granted the state of New Mexico 43% less money, done away with all the strings and the mandates, that I could have effectively overseen the reform of health care to the poor in New Mexico. I believe that that same would exist for Medicare. Give the states, Medicare and Medicaid, 43% less money, do away with all the strings and the mandates, and give it to 50 laboratories of innovation, best practice. That's exactly what you'll have. That's the solution to this.
Thank you. MSNBC is back again. And you know what? Guns kill people. And I'm going to tell you, we need to get rid of all guns. What do you think about that? We'll begin with Mr. Saunders.
In the words of Charlton Heston, from my cold, dead hands. Guns do not kill people. People kill. People are always looking for an excuse to blame their own ills on something. Just like people say the problem now is government. Government's not the problem. It's people who run the government. It's the special interests that take advantage of our government. If you have a candidate that is strong enough to represent the interests of the American people, I mean, for years we've been sending governors, we've been sending senators. For the last 30 to 40 years, they've been running our country, and they tell us that ordinary citizens like us can't do that. Does anybody have any idea of the people, by the people, for the people, what that means? Governors, senators have been presidents running our country for years. How's that been working out for you? You know the definition of insanity? When you keep doing the same thing but expect a different outcome.
Mr. Steele.
I have a long history with the NRA. I'd maxed out my NRA sharpshooter stuff as a junior program by the time I was in the 4th grade. I'm for concealed carry, obviously, but maybe we should even try mandatory carry. So, yeah.
Mr. Wrights.
Well, with all due respect to our reporter, I have to agree with Mr. Saunders. Guns don't kill people. People do. You know, blaming guns for the death is like blaming your pencil for misspelled words. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. The Founding Fathers knew what they were doing when they wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Now, I've often said the only mistake that they made was they made the wrong amendment first. That the Second Amendment should be the first. Because without the Second Amendment, without the right to defend ourselves, particularly against government, all the other rights will go away because you become easy prey. Guns don't kill people. Guns save lives.
Mr. Johnson.
I don't think there could be a clearer amendment to the Constitution. I mean, this is constitutionally guaranteed. In 1994, when I was running for governor of New Mexico, a really cutting-edge issue was concealed carry. There weren't that many states that had concealed carry. I supported it in New Mexico. The notion being, or my belief was that it would actually reduce gun violence, because whenever I see any of these atrocities with guns and killings, I'm always wondering, where is somebody that has a weapon to bring this to an end? That's what I always think. And of course, those statistics have actually borne themselves out, and concealed carry has come somewhat a commonplace among states. And the statistics, I think, have borne out the fact that there is less gun violence.
Mr. Pearson.
We have an increased militarization of our society, and that means that we absolutely have to preserve the right to have guns. Remember the people that walk around judo and karate and all that? How about having not even a gun, but just making it appear like you have a legal gun? No one's going to mess with you. So I think that that's what we need. We need to enforce our right to carry a gun, even if you choose not to, but people will worry that you may have one, and we'll have a better society as a result.
Thank you. Sean Hannity here.
He ain't never looked that good.
We have got to defend the family. We have got to defend the family, and that means a man and a woman being married and having children together. And you libertarians, I just don't think you believe in families at all. Just admit to what you believe about marriage and the role of government in marriage.
Well, it doesn't matter what I believe. This is a 10th Amendment issue. Should be pushed down to the states. If you don't like the way Massachusetts law reads, go live in Texas.
Mr. Wrights.
Well, I agree with you to a degree. I don't believe it's any of the state's business either. no government agency, no bureaucrat, nobody in this room, my mama, ain't going to tell me who I can love, who I can spend my life with, who I'm going to fall in love with. I mean, let's face it, the only reason we had marriage licenses in the first place was because they were instituted so that white Americans could not marry Afro-American Americans. You think George Washington and Martha had a marriage license? Anybody? Of course not. They wouldn't even have thought of that government had a right to say whether you could get married or not. There's just no place in government at all for it.
Mr. Johnson.
I believe in marriage equality. I think it's a constitutionally guaranteed right. And I started out this process by talking about civil unions, supporting civil unions as opposed to getting the government out of the marriage business. And I came to find out that if that were the case, that if that is your advocacy, then federal law would have to be changed in hundreds, if not thousands, of different situations where the word marriage appears. So by supporting marriage equality, effectively no federal lines of law have to be gone through and changed. I support marriage equality. I believe it is constitutionally guaranteed.
Mr. Pearson.
I mean, all of this began when people would agree, informally or otherwise, to live together. It created a contract, and there were property problems and other things that evolved from the contract. If you just look at it as a contract and not worry about the rest of the government coming in and trying all sorts of regulation, you'll find that having gay couples entering into a contract is not inconsistent at all. It's just part of the same contractual problem.
Mr. Saunders.
Well, Mr. Hannity, I would say to you, God gives us all free will. Who the hell are you to take it away from me and decide for me and make my choices? Only God can judge me. Stay out of people's bedroom. Leave people alone and let them live their lives. At the end of the day, God will judge me, not another man. We all fall short of the glory of God.
Thank you. I know for sure that libertarians, all they really want to do is just go around and smoke pot or get high on something. And I just want you to just explain how on earth you want our children to get hooked on drugs.
Well, once again, the media shows its ignorance of libertarian policy. Libertarians are against the drug war, but it's not about being for drug use. It's about being against death, and the death that is caused by this drug war. Yeah, people are killing themselves. They're not killing themselves over the drugs, and the drugs are not killing the people that are using them. They're killing each other over the vast amounts of money that they can make because we've regulated something and created this huge black market. I'm reminded of the days of Prohibition. There was no mafia in this country the way we know it today before they prohibited alcohol. They prohibited alcohol, and they grew from it the greatest criminal organization this country's ever seen. We got to put a stop to the death, and that means stop the war.
Mr. Johnson.
50% of Americans now support legalizing marijuana, and the reason for that is because more and more people are talking about it. The more people talk about it, the more people understand it, and the more acceptance there is to legalizing marijuana. Legalize marijuana, control it, regulate it, tax it. When it comes to all the other drugs, let's look at the drug problem first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. When it comes to my kids, 50% of the graduating class of the year 2012 will have smoked marijuana or done illegal drugs. The message that I send to my kids is that I love them. I'd be naive if they weren't going to try illegal drugs. My message is, if you find yourself in a situation where you've become impaired, give me a call. I'll come pick you up, no questions asked, because I love you. Isn't the drug problem a problem that we want to handle as a family as opposed to subjecting it to the criminal justice system?
Mr. Pearson.
I look at drugs in the same way that I look at gambling. The other day, Newt Gingrich got $10 million a second time from the eighth most wealthy guy in the world, I guess. And now he's heading for a $100 million gift. It's a regulated industry. It's prohibited. You can't open a casino yourself, so those that do have money to buy politics. They're not buying us, they're buying the other people. Get rid of this regulation that's destroying the political process in America. Legalize drugs, legalize gambling, legalize everything, for God's sakes. But don't let them make money, because they will corrupt our system as a result.
Mr. Saunders.
I agree with the governor wholeheartedly that those are my children and I will love them. And I would teach them the same things I teach them about sex, same things I teach them about alcohol. But the real problem with legalizing drugs is because, number one, the politicians that get paid to look the other way while drugs sneak into the country, now they don't get paid anymore. But the other problem is the federal government spends $30,000 per inmate for locking people up because prison is a big business. The other problem is now I can go to my local sheriff and tell him, you know what, I need about 40 guys to help me with my property. He goes out and arrests 50 guys. Now you got cheap labor. That's the whole problem behind legalizing drugs. If you legalize it, then you take away the big business. You have to see the big picture.
Mr. Steele.
Well, this is a balance between the potential societal damage of drug use, and I agree with some of the others, and that is, this is a family issue and should be handled there. What the government is doing is creating a monopoly amongst the most dangerous people in the world. And the government should get out of that business. Number one, the so-called war is not working. And number two, there are other ways of handling it, just like you would in a homeschool environment. In other words, handle it within the family.
Thank you. You are for smaller government, so I'm assuming that you're going to get rid of some government agencies. Could you give me a list of the first ones that you plan to eliminate when you become president?
Well, so I'm open to the discussion of shutting down any government agency. As governor of New Mexico, when I appointed the heads of the agencies, their number one task was to work themselves out of a job. But the Department of Education is one. Department of Education gives each state 11 cents out of every dollar that every state spends, but it comes with 16 cents worth of strings attached. It's a negative to take federal money. Just give education back to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and that's exactly what you'll have. Housing and urban development should be eliminated. Department of Homeland Security should be eliminated. I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico, maybe more bills than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I would have vetoed Homeland Security. I would have never established the Department of, or I would have never established TSA.
Mr. Pearson.
The Department of Education, let me tell you, among others, there's plenty of agencies and plenty of programs that must go. But the Department of Education goes around to regulated schools and takes 5 files and pulls out and says, oh, you're missing a document here, here, and here. Give 100% refund to the students. And then they go on into the next school and do the same thing. One school after another, they fine them for every file has something missing. So there's no big deal. But they go ahead and fine the schools automatically. The schools put up with it. They add that to the price of tuition. Forget the Department of Education, totally worthless, get rid of them, the Department of Agriculture and other people that are giving away your money.
Mr. Saunders.
I would start by reducing the military's budget by 50%. The Pentagon is slated to receive $4 trillion over the next 4 years. If I reduce that budget by 50%, I can have China paid off in 4 years. We have the world's largest fleet that's 13 sizes larger than our next competition. They're not going to catch up to us in 4 years. Other departments I would get rid of: Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, Homeland Security, HUD. We have over 80 agencies that are regulating teacher evaluation performance. All those are gone overnight.
Well, the broken record here. HUD, Homeland Security, most of their functionality has been conducted in the past by the FBI, and that's just fine with me. Commerce, education, defense, significant cuts. The Department of Energy, we still spend tens of billions of dollars on researching refining, improving our nuclear weapons program. This is totally ridiculous and unnecessary.
Well, I'm glad to get this question because this is the one area where I intend to create a lot of jobs in the private sector. Of course, the research has been done and outlined in Dr. Ruart's fine book, Healing Our World, that for every bureaucrat, every regulator that loses their job, 150 private sector jobs are created. So we start doing away with some of these agencies, start firing bureaucrats, 150, 150. No telling how many jobs we could create. Definitely need to do away with Homeland Security. It's a redundant department. We have a Department of Defense that we've always had. TSA. There's one thing that the Department of Homeland Security has never confiscated in 10 years of existence, and that's a terrorist.
Wolf Blitzer here from CNN, and I was a moderator on one of these Republican debates, and Ron Paul said that he would just eliminate the IRS and eliminate the income tax and replace it with nothing. Is that what you would do?
It's a very complicated issue. We need to eliminate all of the giveaways that exist within the very complicated tax code. I sort of featured, I was brought up with taxes at law school. I studied corporate reorganizations and things like that. It's so complicated. We shouldn't have allowed all these mergers, for one thing, where they merge for tax purposes and then they do away with jobs. But we need to eliminate a lot of things like that, but especially the preferences that many people have that aren't commonly shared. So we pay for other people to get those tax benefits. That should be eliminated immediately.
Mr. Saunders.
Mr. Blitzer? Yes, absolutely. The American people should be afforded the opportunity to take their money home and not have the federal government step in and take it for them. It is unconstitutional for someone to go to work and then at the end of the day, the federal government take their money. I believe things should be returned to the private sector. The only tax that I would agree to is the gas tax, because that does pay for the roads. The police, the fire department, ambulance, these are all things that can be run by the private sector and not our taxes. The same way the school system works, private schools. If you take less money from people, then they would have more money to send their kids to private schools. You don't need to have the government pay for everything on the backs of the American people by taking your taxes.
Mr. Steele.
Oh, absolutely. I've said that on day 2 of my administration, I'll go take the largest padlock available and take it down to Constitution Avenue, put that on the IRS building. We're going to send those guys home permanently. There'll be no more IRS, there'll be no more income tax. Carl Denninger, my chief economic advisor, who runs Market Ticker, one of the largest economic blogs in the world, and I have calculated that it only takes 18.8% consumption tax after we make appropriate cuts in these agencies we've talked about to completely fund government, appropriate government. So yeah, no more IRS, no more income tax.
Well, it sounds good for us to sit up here and say, yeah, I'd do away with the income tax. Yeah, I would do away with the IRS. When in actuality, the president can't do that. Those are entities and powers that are relegated to Congress. What a president can do is encourage legislation, encourage Congress to do things. Yeah, we should do away with the income tax and replace it with nothing. Like Thomas Sowell says, when you put out a fire, what do you replace it with? The government has no right to the money that you make, to the sweat of your brow. The fruits of your labor do not belong to any government agency, and yet they act like that they own, that they are owed somehow, that they have a right to a certain percentage of what you bring home. They do not. And they knew they didn't. That's why they had to implement the 16th Amendment in order to allow them to take the money in the first place. They've given themselves permission to be thieves, and we need to put a stop to it.
Mr. Johnson.
I'm promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I'm promising to veto expenditures that exceed revenue. And I'm promising to advocate on the part of the fair tax, which is throwing out all existing federal tax, income tax, corporate tax, IRS, and replace it with a consumption tax, the fair tax, that by all measurements will end up being will be revenue neutral, but it'll be cost neutral over a very short amount of time, because what you're going to do is you're going to take obscure embedded tax, 23% in all goods and services. You're going to eliminate that. You're going to make it a very transparent 23% consumption tax. I think it reboots the American economy. It makes our exports 23% more competitive. In a zero corporate tax rate environment, if the private sector doesn't create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know under what situation tens of millions of jobs get created.
Thank you. I'm Barack Obama, and I'm a civil libertarian, and I ran against George W. Bush, who started all these things like the Patriot Act and all of these things, and I decided to make them even stronger when I got elected president. So what are you going to do about terrorism? How are you going to keep us from having terrorism taking over the country?
First thing you got to do is you must understand terrorism will never go away because it's a form of ignorance. It's just like we have racism in this country. There's peace between blacks and whites. But you will always have a segment of society, as long as you have human beings, that there will be some semblance of ignorance. If you want to protect Americans, the first thing you need to do is get out of those Muslim countries and stop telling those people how to run their nations. That is the best way for you to protect Americans, by minding your own business. Now, if something should occur, then we have the right to defend ourselves against that ignorance. But unlike most candidates, I have a detailed plan for immigration and how to keep us safe.
Mr. Steele.
Well, terrorism can be handled perfectly well domestically by the FBI, internationally by the CIA and the NSA. That's the way we've always done it in the past. Just because a few people fell asleep at the switch, doesn't mean that we have to have another layer of bureaucracy even more expensive than what we had before. Obama is setting up some really weird scenarios here, and then I don't trust the guy, obviously, like everybody else in this room. But there's something strange going on, and I think there are some very unpleasant scenarios coming down the road after he gets reelected.
Mr. Wright.
Well, Mr. Saunders hit it pretty well when he said that terrorism is not going to go away. And he's right, it's not. This is a classic example of what I've been talking about throughout my campaign, stopping the wars. We need to stop the war on terrorism. It's it's almost an oxymoron. Terrorism is war. So we're having war on war now? The reason that we have so much terrorism, particularly pointed towards America, is because we can't keep our nose out of anybody's business. What's worse than somebody that moves in next door to you and immediately is in your business all the time trying to tell you what to do? Well, what's worse would be if that person actually lived the next street over, or in the next town, or God forbid, he lives on the other side of the world and is still in your business every day trying to tell you what to do. It makes people angry. It makes them want to go to war. So we stop giving them a reason to want to go to war with us.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, President Obama, regarding civil liberties, I don't know if you all saw it, but the ACLU came out with a report card 3 weeks ago on all the presidential candidates. 24 Liberty torches was a perfect score. Let's see. Santorum and Romney got 0 Liberty torches. Newt Gingrich got 4. President Obama, you got 16. Ron Paul got 18, but I got 21. So who is really looking out for American civil liberties? I think I'm the one. And as a disclaimer and a credit, every other single candidate on stage here, of course, if they'd have been included in that survey, would have rated that same level.
The FBI is adequate and should be here doing the job instead of having additional layers of government. And we have so much excess policing in the country that truly is a waste of time. It's a whole military operation that is unnecessary. We should get rid of it. And getting rid of other military operations like war on drugs, all of this thing is too much war. And if we can cut back and just have us go back to the FBI, I think that we can handle the terrorist problem and the international using the CIA. So that's my answer to that.
Now I'm the governor of Arizona, and I had the perfect solution to immigration, and we've got this great law in Arizona. What do you think about that, and what would you do if you were in charge of the border?
I think border security is an essential asset, essential fact of sovereignty. So I'm not an open border kind of guy. I think we need to control those people coming into the country.
Well, immigration is a good place where we can see once again how government has created a greater problem than we had before. Saw a Stossel report on this several months ago. If you're a PhD from India, you want to immigrate to the United States, it takes you between 5 and 7 years to become a citizen, a reasonable amount of time. If you're south of the border and you're a migrant worker, it takes you 131 years to go through the process. That's why you have an immigration problem. You have made a law that is impossible for people to follow. So quite naturally, it has become easier to swim the Rio Grande than to climb Mount Bureaucracy. You make laws that are impossible to follow, people won't follow them.
Mr. Johnson.
I'm opposed to the laws that were passed in Arizona. It's Arizona's right to be able to do that, and I am a states' rights guy, so let them do it, and it's not working. I'll just tell you that. Don't build a fence. What a waste of money. And when it comes to individuals that want to come into this country and work, make it as easy as possible to get a work visa. Not a green card, not citizenship, but a work visa. And that would entail a background check and a social security card so that applicable taxes would get paid. If we implement the fair tax, taxes won't even be an issue because fair taxes will be unavoidable. Legal, illegal, visitor, citizen, fair tax, unavoidable. With regard to the 11 million illegal immigrants that are here in this country right now, that is an unintended consequence of Reagan when he set up his amnesty period in the 80s. He coupled that with putting government in charge of quotas. And that was a breakdown from day one. We need to document the 11 million illegal immigrants that are here in this country. That's how you secure the border.
Mr. Pearson.
We need to create jobs in America, and if we do that, we're going to be demanding that we have a lawful immigration program to fill these jobs. We're not going to, America can get back to work again. We can create those jobs, but we can create so many with our efforts in America that we need an immigration policy that will encourage people to come here and to fill some of those jobs that we won't be able to fill ourselves.
Under my administration, all illegal immigrants will have a 1-year notice to report to their local INS office. The reason I gave them a 1-year notice is so that they can come up with the money for becoming a naturalized citizen of America. Once you do that, there's no need for a work visa. There's no need for anything else at that point. We also take the 1-year time to streamline the process. It shouldn't take you 5-6 years, as my colleague said, Mount Bureaucracy. Take the test, pay the money, become a citizen. You're here in the country now. Also, I create jobs. At the same time, I've just created $49 billion in revenue. Now we have them with tax ID numbers. They can pay tax. And oh yeah, by the way now, healthcare is now reduced because now these are citizens now that have tax ID numbers and can pay taxes now.
The baby boomers are retiring now, and we're seeing even more problems. It's becoming obvious that Social Security is going broke. What are we going to do with it about Social Security, Mr. Wrights?
Well, this is one of the biggest problems that we have in the country now. If we took the federal budget, took everything out of it, literally everything out of it except for the military, Social Security, Medicare, we'd still be going into debt. That's how big those three are. We've taken on a project, once again, that's too big even for our government to handle. Now, we're libertarians, and we believe in the power of contracts. It's my position that that's exactly what the government has done with our senior citizens. They have, in essence, made a contract with each one of them individually to return their money to them as they get older. I think we need to honor those contracts, the ones that we have made. What we need to do to start solving this problem is stop making new contracts with young people that are just getting into the workforce and lying to them and telling them that when they're 65, the money's going to be there when we know they're not. Stop lying to people, let them keep their money and plan for their own retirements, and get government out of the way.
Mr. Johnson.
Social Security is a problem that is just pale in comparison when it comes to spending to Medicare and Medicaid. But Social Security, very simply, it's not going to be about cutting Social Security. Social Security is very simply a system that needs to take in more money than what it pays out. And so to fix this, raise the retirement age, change the escalator that's built into Social Security from the wage index to the inflation rate, I think that we should have opt-in, opt-out kind of options, which would be very exciting to be able to self-direct your Social Security. And then with the fair tax eliminates deductions from your payroll checks. So no more Social Security pay-in to Social Security, nor does your employer pay that match anymore. The proceeds from Social Security come out of the proceeds of the fair tax.
Mr. Pearson.
We need to protect the people who have paid in, and we need reform in a variety of ways. And Governor Johnson has indicated some ways, and we need to have a sensible program that is actuarially sound and has options where people can go a private route if they wish.
Mr. Saunders.
The first thing I would do is raise the retirement age, but it can't be done right now. It's not fair to the people who have planned their whole life, did their savings. I would do it in the next 15 years, and I'd raise the retirement age to 72. But another thing we can do is we can enforce laws that are on the books. We spend over $100 billion a year processing Medicare fraud. Over the next 15 years, if you reduce that money, that's $1.5 trillion. The other thing we can do is you can reduce the cost of Medicaid by 50%. A dear friend of mine is here in the audience. She went for an eye test. It cost her $150 without insurance. She took her grandmother back the very next day to get her eyes done, and Medicaid was billed $350. If I can reduce Medicaid costs by 50%, in 15 years, combined with the fraud, I just saved us over $7 trillion.
Mr. Steele.
I think the opt-in, opt-out is just a recipe for disaster, a recipe for upcoming bailouts. You need to phase the thing out entirely, but you need to do it gradually. We need to preserve most of the contractual stipulations that we have today. We can adjust that slightly, and have tremendous benefits, but we need to get out of that business altogether. And as far as you keep hearing the mention of fair tax, that's why I use the term consumption tax. Fair tax definitely has some very unusual, to me, provisions, namely the check that they send to every individual to somehow make everything equal. So that's why I call it a consumption tax, just because I don't like that aspect of the fair tax.
Thank you. The next question you will have 1 minute to answer, and that is each candidate can tell us what their big issues will be if they're the nominee. What issue would you emphasize the most, 1 or 2 or 3 issues, and give your position on that issue? We'll begin with Mr. Johnson.
I promise, if elected President of the United States, that I will submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. Now, that's not promising to balance the federal budget. I can't do that. Congress would have to do that. But I'm promising to submit that document, and that is a 43% reduction in what we're currently spending. We need to stop printing money. That's the key. I'm also promising to veto any expenditures that exceed revenue. I suggest to you that with those 2 promises, spending will be less than any other possible scenario than you can possibly come up with. Added to that, I am promising to advocate on the part of a consumption tax, and in particular the fair tax. I think the fair tax really does reboot the American economy for the next 100 years, that by doing away with all existing federal tax, the IRS, that in a zero corporate tax rate environment, we will create tens of millions of jobs. And that's what we need in this country. Fair. I think the name is as it implies. It does issue a prebate check, but that's a discussion that I think we would all like to have is reforming taxes. How do we go about doing that?
Mr. Pearson.
The issue that I would work on is both jobs and education. I've told you how we can create 20 million jobs. There's really no problem in creating those jobs. We need to just relax the payroll regulation requirements, and small business will have half of what it needs. The other half is that we have to deregulate post-secondary education. We have to allow private enterprise to develop the training programs that are needed in order to create the trained employees who will go to work for small business and help small business create jobs that are needed for America. We have to deregulate higher education and vocational training. It is so highly regulated now that we don't have anyone putting up the schools that are needed. It only costs $2,000 a year to train a person to get a job that's worth about $1,500 a week. If we had deregulation of education, as it is now, you go to college and can't even get a job, but $200,000 sometimes when you get out.
Mr. Saunders.
I would continue to focus on the American economy and creating jobs. At the same time, I want you to think about this as the governor alluded to, the fair tax system, where you pay 23% and rich corporations pay nothing. Companies like GE, multi-billion-dollar corporations, pay nothing. Why wouldn't you at least say, okay, the American people, you pay 13% and have the corporations pay 10%? Why not have them pay something? Because you know why? Because they want to give them everything while they take from you. So again, I asked you, who is going to stand up and fight for you, the American people, while they give a certain portion of people everything while they take everything from you? My goal is to provide solutions and be the voice of the middle class, because that voice is no longer here. We keep sending millionaires to Washington, and then we wonder why the tax laws and everything favors rich people, why we have two sets of laws in our tax codes. Because whose interest do you think they are acting on? The problem is we need to remove special interests. This way we can relate to our own, again, of the people, by the people, for the people. So many times they tell us that you and I are not qualified to run the country when each of us runs a budget every week, every month in our homes. We all know you can't spend more money than you make.
Well, you might be surprised to know that my primary issue, my main issue, is not the money issue. Actually, there's one issue that supersedes the money issue, and that's the deconsolidation of power issue at every level of governance. Obama has, to an unprecedented degree, consolidated power, not only the political power, but the money power as well. That we have to, at every level of governance, we have to push power down between the relationship between federal and state. We have to utilize the 10th Amendment to give states more power. Okay, but now on the money issue, that's easy too. Number one, no more national debt. I would push for a bill, a constitutional amendment to forbid government borrowing. Once governments, you may not know it, but the national debt, they primarily borrow from banks and central banks. Number two, you have to eliminate the fractional reserve lending problem. That's where banks get to lend more money than they actually have. By federal law, they're supposed to be limited to 10 times the amount of money they actually have, but in fact they're lending 50 and up to 333 times. And a jobs program won't cut it. I just don't want to hear that. You have to reform the system. A jobs program won't cut it.
Mr. Wright.
Well, true to what I've said throughout my campaign, the first thing I would do once elected president is declare peace. Notify the American people and the rest of the world, America's going to be at peace. That doesn't mean we're going to be easy prey. We're going to defend ourselves. But we're not going to be the ones instigating the problem. We're not going to be the ones aggressing and making you want to go to war. If you come after us, look out. I'm going to unleash everything I've got to protect my people. The economy, once again, what we need to do here is deregulate. I don't care what kind of fancy words you put to it, there is no tax that is fair. There's nothing fair about a tax that allows government to continue to collect the same amount of money that they're collecting now, just figuring out a different way for them to get the money. It's fair to government, but it's not fair to the American people. There's nothing fair about them continuing to take and take and take, and most of us get nothing for it in return. We need to reduce taxes. We need to do away with spending. We need to stop spending and stop printing money that's not worth the paper that it's printed on. Wholesale government reform would be also on my mind. As Mr. Steele says, the deconsolidation of power is utmost in my mind as far as administrative decisions.
Thank you. We will now move to closing comments, and what I would like for you to do with this is you have a minute each, and I would like for you to make your best pitch to these delegates of why you should win the nomination. But at the beginning of your statement, before you do that, I would like you to answer one quick question, and that is, if you are not the nominee, will you support the nominee, and if so, in what way? And then you can proceed with your pitch. So we will begin with Mr. Pearson.
Of course, I would support the Libertarian Party nominee, and I would help him or her. I don't see any females. There should have been, but there isn't. In any way that I can. But the reason that I think that I should be the nominee is that I really do understand the method of creating jobs. I created the paralegal field, and I have created a field of being an assistant to the owner of small business, a highly technical field that will be put a person in line for getting into business himself or herself by being the assistant to the owner of a small business. This is where the job growth in the country has got to be, because no one else has any net new jobs for America. So that's why I should be elected, because I can put America back to work again. I understand how.
Mr. Saunders.
Absolutely, wholeheartedly, I will support whichever one of these gentlemen by volunteering and becoming a member of their campaign, by going out and collecting signatures, doing whatever I have to do to further the libertarian cause. But the reason I feel that I am the best candidate is because the one thing that's missing in Washington is someone needs to bridge the gap between Washington and the middle class people. Do you remember when they gave us a stimulus of $400 a week and they told us that should make everything better for us? They don't understand what you and I go through when we are filling up gas. But when you keep sending millionaires to Washington, the disconnect grows. I understand what it's like when you have to make a decision about which bills to pay. I send my kids to school. I pay my rent. It's the same thing with budget and Medicare, only different. The numbers are bigger. And I can count really high. Trust me, I can. And I can use a calculator. It's all about, do we spend more than we make? And if you go to my website, Saunders2012.org, I am the candidate that has the solutions for 99% of the problems that are facing our country today by using common sense and logic.
Mr. Steele.
Yes, I can support the nominee. I have a unique video production capability, which a lot of you have seen on YouTube. If not, you can search for the Steele Report on YouTube. Nobody else here in this room can crank them out like I can. To recap my issues, why you should vote for me. Number one, deconsolidation of power at every level of governments. That is my main thrust. Number two, monetary reform. No more debt money system. No more counterfeiting of money by banks. The rule of law demands prosecution of banks and Wall Streeters who built the unlawful credit bubble. Some on this podium don't believe that that's true. Number three, national sovereignty is the bulwark of world freedom, the biggest thorn in the side of the New World Order. Sovereignty requires a sovereign money system and defensible borders. Number four, defense policy. We need to stay strong, but in a more isolationist way. Congress must declare war for us to pursue war. Number five, an incentive-driven society instead of a government sugar daddy giveaway society. Number six, medicine. Fix the last week of life problem, end the huge advantage granted to medical patents. Number seven, trade deficit. Constitutional tariffs to make American manufacturing competitive once again. And number eight, tax policy. No more IRS, 18.8% consumption tax.
Mr. Wright.
Well, I'm absolutely going to support the nominee of the Libertarian Party, just as I have in every election. There's a small handful of people in this party have been trying to run me off for a long time. You can't even run me off with a stick, so yes, I'm hanging around. And what we're doing with this campaign is proving that. I mentioned in the beginning of this debate the videos and the Million Vote March. Both of these have been set up not to just benefit my campaign, but to benefit all Libertarian candidates. We've made the videos editable, so that congressional candidates, other candidates can take them and edit at the end and put their own information in. We will give that to them free of charge. They've got the work already done. They just have to get it edited. The Million Vote March. This is not about electing Lee Wrights. This is about getting 1 million votes for the first time in the history of this party for whoever the nominee is. And that's why I've offered it to all the candidates. This is a year that we can be making a difference. And the way we do that is to be different. And that's what I intend to be.
Mr. Johnson.
I will support the nominee, regardless of who that nominee is, as long as it's one of us up here. And I actually recognize there are another 6, I guess. But as governor of New Mexico, not one penny of tax went up over the 8 years that I was governor of New Mexico. There were 1,200 fewer state employees in the state of New Mexico over an 8-year period. That had never happened before. I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico. I advocated drug reform. I advocated school choice. They did a report of all the presidential candidates on who had the best record when it came to jobs. It was me. And I gave them the same response that I gave when I was governor of New Mexico. I didn't create one single job as governor of New Mexico, but I created a regulatory environment, I think, that got better on a daily basis. That better was just rooted in common sense. Government doesn't create jobs, the private sector does. They also did a report on which of the presidential candidates was viewed favorably in his or her own state, and I was the only candidate viewed favorably in his or her own state. I'm telling you, I drive around in New Mexico right now, and people are wave at me with all 5 fingers, not just one. And it's something that's really real. We need to balance the federal budget. We need to slash spending. Libertarians really combine the best of the hearts and minds of both the Democrats and the Republicans. Libertarians have an incredible opportunity right now to make a difference.
Thank you very much.